Hi Booklovers, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about 3 recently released fantasy romances that I read. All 3 of them released in 2020, 2 of them in July, and 1 of them back in March. The March release was From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and this one was actually our book club read for Ravished by Romance, the book club that me and my friend Jessica from Peace Love Books both co-host. Our live chat for this book is already up on our channel, so if you missed it, be sure to check it out. I'll leave a link to it down below. And the more recent ones are Deal with the Devil by Rocha and A Touch of Stone and Snow by Milla Vane. This is book 2 in the Gathering of Dragons series and the sequel to A Heart of Blood and Ashes. Luckily, I already read this one last year when it came out, so I won't get these 2 titles mixed up because the titles are so similar. I sadly don't read enough fantasy romances, or I don't read them as often as I used to. I definitely read more paranormal romances, more urban fantasy, but not straight up like high fantasy romances. So reading these 3 basically in a row just made me remember how much I love this subgenre and that I need to get on reading more. The first book that I want to talk about is Deal with the Devil by Rocha. This is the first book in this author duo's brand new series called the Mercenary Librarian series. This is more of a dystopian post-apocalyptic kind of romance rather than like a high fantasy romance, but the blurb calls it Orphan Black meets the post-apocalyptic Avengers. It's a pretty epic book. I really enjoyed it. I gave this one 4 stars. It was my first time reading Rocha. I've been wanting to read so many of their post-apocalyptic fantasy romances for the longest time. I own a bunch of their Beyond books, which are erotic dystopian, and they all sound amazing. I just never got the chance to get to them, so this one is my first book from them. I like the writing, though I can't say it's really anything special, but the concept of this book is great. I enjoyed it so much. We have a group of heroines. Nina is our main character. She has 2 best friends, and they are literally mercenary librarians. They kick ass and they protect their city from unsavory people, and their librarian aspect is that they have this little printing press, which is very rare in this post-apocalyptic world, and they sell books. Our hero Knox is the captain of this group of super soldiers named the Silver Devils. They used to work for the government, but now they've gone AWOL because they just don't want to mindlessly kill anymore. Unfortunately, because of the way that they were engineered, Knox and his super soldiers only have a limited time to live before something inside of them kills them. These 2 groups meet when the Silver Devils hire the mercenary librarians to accompany them to find this kind of lost treasure where they'll end up with a ton of money. Unfortunately, unbeknownst to the mercenary librarians, the Silver Devils are actually double-crossing them. Knox is actually supposed to deliver Nina to this mysterious person in order to save himself and his group of soldiers because of that thing that's about to kill them. Of course, things get a little complicated when Nina and Knox start to fall in love, and these 2 squads start to actually become genuine friends. So Knox is faced with either, saving his soldiers but betraying Nina, or being with Nina and letting his soldiers die. Neither is a good option. So that's about the gist of this story. I thought it was a good first book, like an intro to a new series. It's action-packed, a lot of suspense, and I'm so happy that the romance is actually like a forefront to this book, or at least balanced really well with everything else going on. I was a little afraid, since it is published with Tor, that the romance would be a little overshadowed, but no, Rocha definitely promises the romance in this one, and it definitely classifies as a fantasy romance. All of these characters are really interesting. I enjoy this cast that Rocha has created. Each of them has some sort of special superhuman ability that was literally engineered into them by the government, by the US government. It's almost sci-fi in a way, but I did enjoy it. I definitely will be continuing on with the series. It wasn't mind-blowing or anything, but I did you know, like these characters. I do wish that we got more of the librarian aspect of the series title. It is called Mercenary Librarians, but we get more of the mercenary part than the librarian part. There are going to be 2 more books in the series about Nina's fellow mercenary librarians, Maya and Danny. Surprisingly, we do actually get Danny and Maya's point of views, as well as a couple of the other side characters sprinkled throughout this book, though mainly it is told in Nina and Nox's point of views. Danny and Maya's heroes will probably be 2 of the Silver Devils. We get a little tease about who they could be. The ending isn't quite a cliffhanger ending. We have, you know, a solid ending to Nina and Nox's romance, but there's definitely a bigger plot at play regarding the evil US government and them trying to take them down that we will see more of in future books. The world building is good. It's not insane info dumping or anything like that. The cast of characters is a lot of fun. Despite this being post-apocalyptic, these characters do try to find a lot of humor as much as they can in this really depressing world. So I am really excited to read the future books. If you love your post-apocalyptic dystopian romances with a ton of action, I would definitely recommend Deal with the Devil. And the next fantasy romance that I read is A Touch of Stone and Snow by Milla Vane. This is the sequel to Heart of Blood and Ashes, and sadly I didn't love the sequel quite as much as book 1. Book 1 I gave 4.5 stars to. Book 2 I'm sadly giving it around 3.5 stars. Like, it wasn't bad, but it definitely didn't live up to my expectations, especially after how much I loved book 1. And I honestly should have loved it more because it has some of my favorite tropes. It's childhood friends to lovers, second chance romance. These are my favorite tropes, but it just didn't work for me all that well. And the main reason why is because I felt like the romance was way overshadowed by everything else going on. I just wanted more of the romance, especially because it was so soft and sweet. I just didn't get enough of those vibes. The potential is there, but it's more like we're told about their childhood as best friends. We're told how they fell in love for the first time. I felt like we weren't shown these things enough, so the emotions were missing for me. And also reading the sequel, it felt like I was reading the first book in a new series. Everything felt so new. Like, you would think that after having read all the world building in book 1, because there's so much world building and so much info, that I would have known what I was getting into, that I would have been used to the world, but it's like a different area to this whole kingdom. It's a whole new cast of characters, lots of new magic and creatures, so it just felt like I was reading the first book in a new series. So it took time to get used to everything again. There was a lot of info dumping that definitely took me out of the story a bit, but I did love the action, the suspense. Milla Vane definitely delivers with that aspect. I just wanted more romance, honestly. It's hard not to compare to book 1, but I thought romance was so well balanced in book 1. Like, yes, it was slow burn, but I was definitely invested in these characters from the beginning. But it took me forever to warm up to Lizanne and Arax. These 2 are from the land of Koth, and Lizanne has recently been exiled, so she is pretty much wandering around drinking most of the time and trying to find her purpose again, especially without Arax, the man that she loves. Arax is the bastard prince of Koth. He and Lizanne have known each other since they were really young. They were best friends turned lovers, but they were torn apart when Lizanne was exiled and Arax refused to leave with her. I mean, he wanted to. He loved her as much as she loved him, but he made some promises and he couldn't leave with Lizanne without fulfilling those promises first. There's a lot of angst when it comes to these 2. I mean, they're still so much in love with each other, and yet they can't be together. The potential for me to love it was there. I just didn't think that it was executed well enough for me, because they literally have to put aside their romance in order to save the world. While the romance was a bit of a disappointment, I still really loved these characters individually. Lizanne is such a strong heroine. Milla Vane writes such amazing heroines that I can't help but admire and love. Arax is a total total teddy bear when it comes to Lizanne. Like, he worships her so much, but he's also at the same time feral. Like, he will destroy anyone who even dares to hurt Lizanne. But I do want to say the star of this book, of this fantasy romance, is definitely Erex's pet snowcat, Cabe. Cabe is a saber-toothed tiger and he can understand humans. He was taken in by Erex when he was a little cub, and they are very much a family, the three of them are. But yeah, I loved Cabe so much. He made such a great side character, always trying to push Lizanne and Erex back together, always there to protect the two of them and add a lot of humor to their angsty romance. I always love seeing pets in romances, especially ones with such big personalities that they rival the main characters, and Cabe is definitely one of my new favorites now. I sadly just didn't love this one as much as I hoped I would, but even so, I would recommend reading this if you loved A Heart of Blood and Ashes, because it continues on with the whole Destroyer plot. The Destroyer is this evil being that's trying to take over the land, the kingdoms, and all of these main characters are trying to form alliances in order to destroy it. There is also a character that was introduced in A Touch of Stone and Snow that I was really hoping we would get a story for, and it turns out he's gonna be the hero of book 3. Book 3 is called A Dance of Smoke and Steel, and I am so excited for it. I'm really hoping I love it at least more than A Touch of Stone and Snow. I mean, I really enjoy Milla Vane's writing. I really don't know how she comes up with such a unique concept to her fantasy world, but I love it. Even though I wasn't all that into the romance in book 2, I was still hooked onto all of the action, all of the badassery going on, especially towards the end. So I still have really high hopes for book 3. On a side note, I am very intrigued by the mysterious character who left a chopped off penis as a temple offering in this one scene in A Touch of Stone and Snow. I don't know if Milla Vane is going to write more about that, but it was such an unexpected scene that I really want to know more. And the third and last fantasy romance that I read recently is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This one released a little while ago. I actually got it a little early thanks to JLA's publicist, but I never got to it until now for our book club read, and I'm so glad I finally read it. And I'm actually glad I waited a little bit to read this one so I didn't have to wait too long for book 2, which is out September 1st. This one I loved so freaking much. I have heard such amazing things for this book before I started. I heard there were vampires, I heard there was a cliffhanger. I was just so intrigued by all the praise that I heard. But I mean, I love JLA. I've read so many of her books before this one, both contemporary and fantasy, so I was already familiar with her, but I gotta say From Blood and Ash is probably her best work to date. It is the first book in a new series, and it is so good. The writing is amazing, the world building is amazing, and the romance, I loved it so much. This book, I'm giving it 4.5, maybe 5 stars. Like, I will say that the first maybe 75-80% of this book, it was a solid 4-star read. And then once everything started happening, all these plot twists, so much action, it 100% bumped up that 4-star rating. So I don't know if I want to give it 4.5 or 5 stars, but it was epic. I now see why so many people love it, and I am dying for book 2. Apparently there are going to be 4 books, but a little bit about this world. Poppy, our heroine, is the maiden. What that means, we honestly still don't really know. But after the death of her parents, and when the kingdom found out that she was the maiden, she has been kept under a lock and key her whole life. She's not allowed to talk to anyone. She's not allowed to show her face. She's not allowed to do anything until the day of her ascension, where she becomes an ascended. The ascended in this world are kind of like immortal. The ascended are blessed by the gods. They are physically powerful, and they pretty much rule this entire kingdom. There are also such things called the Craven, which are kind of like evil zombie-like vampires. If a human accidentally gets bitten by a Craven, they themselves will end up turning into Craven. It's a pretty dangerous world out there, but Poppy thankfully has learned how to defend herself. She knows how to fight, how to use a sword. I love her. And the first chance that she gets to experience any kind of pleasure, she ends up going to this place called the Red Pearl, and she ends up being kissed by a man named Hawk. They share such an amazing and strong connection from the moment that they meet each other, but of course, her being the maiden, nothing can come out of it. But when one of Poppy's bodyguards ends up being killed, Hawk is of course the one to replace him. So Poppy and Hawk are in very close proximity now, and the tension and chemistry that's between them is simmering. I just really like the banter between these two when Hawk is Poppy's bodyguard, but it turns out that things are not quite as they seem. This whole world, these characters, everything gets turned upside down in the last, say, 100 pages. Some of the things I did predict, but mostly I was just in awe of everything going on. It was plot twist upon plot twist. The romance amps up like crazy. The last 100 pages were honestly truly epic. I've already did a little reread of the last 100 pages. I loved it that much. It does end on a cliffhanger. The last line is so good, but I hate it because now I'm dying for book 2. I just love this one. I thought it was an incredible start to a new series, a new fantasy series. The world building was great. I can't wait to learn more about it. We still have so many things to learn about it. And despite it being 600 pages, it was really easy to read. I just flew by this book, especially the ending. I could not put it down. So if you haven't read this one yet, do it. It is mind-blowing and the romance is hot. Honestly, the only main bad thing that I can say about this book is the blurb. Like I talked about it in the live chat, but it is such a long blurb and yet it doesn't really tell you anything. I would not read the blurb if you're trying to understand what this book is about because it doesn't tell you anything. I would just dive into this one because it's really easy to immerse yourself into this world and to understand what's going on. The writing is really fun and easy to read, and surprisingly, with how long this book is, there isn't a ton of info dumping. And if you couldn't tell, From Blood and Ash is 100% my favorite fantasy romance of the 3 that I read for this video. So that's it for some of the recent fantasy romances that I read. If you read any of these, let me know your thoughts. If you have your own favorite fantasy romances, I always love recommendations. As always, links for all of these books are down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!